Up next, we have another exciting guest, author of Happiness Power, How to Unleash Your Power and Live a More Joyful Life. He is also author of Shyness Power, Optimist Power, The Conservative versus the Liberal Conundrum, Hidden in Plain Sight, Are We Born That Way? And 90 Days to Your First Real Estate Investment. I'd like to welcome Robert Gill Jr. to the show. How you doing, Robert?
I'm doing great, Dylan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a little bit different of a guest this week, but I like different, and I think that you have some wonderful things you can share with the audience. So that's kind of why I had asked you to be on the show. I'm pretty excited about some of the work that you're doing here. I know my listeners might be a little confused. I got a guy on that is writing books about real estate and liberal versus conservative, but I think where I really want to dive in is a lot of your empowering and self-help books, if you will. What is your background, I guess?
I was for many years a consultant to industry, writing business plans for them. And so I developed a feeling for research and thus got into writing as a result of that.
Okay. And then your first book was, what was your first?
Well, my first book is, I've also been investing in real estate all my life, 54 years.
Wow.
And the COVID difficulty caused many people to have destroy their earning power. And I wanted to give some of the millennials a chance to learn what I did. So I put together a book called 90 Days to Your First Real Estate Investment Purchase, which gives you an idea of how to begin investing in income producing real estate. And I used 90 days, even though it seems rather quick, to give an incentive to move people along. So each chapter gives you the next step until you make the purchase. I started my investment when I was about 17 years old. I bought my first two-family house. So I think if I did it, anybody can do it with the way I showed them how to do it.
I think that's really, really smart. I've often thought of that. Like, man, I should have gotten real estate when I was young. And
doesn't matter what age.
That's
by
true.
The way.
That's true. That's true. If you had to, I guess, give a small piece of advice for some young listeners out there who are maybe, interested, or maybe have never even thought about it, just have an interest, or maybe want to do something that can be, very financially, gaining, I guess, or, be able to grow wealth and to be able to, do things like that. What would you give them, like, as far as investing in real estate?
Well, if they're thinking of buying a house, and most people eventually think about that, whether they decide to stay in a house or an apartment. If you're thinking about buying a house, think about buying a two-family house or a duplex house, where you can live on one side of the house and let the tenant pay the mortgage from the other side of the house. It's very easy to collect the rent every month. It doesn't require too much difficulty, but just make that thought. And as you're doing that, you can gain income, put a little bit in the bank, a few more years, then you can buy another one. And eventually, in about 10 years, it takes you about that time, 10 to 12 years, you'll have enough income producing real estate to want to retire.
That's a beautiful thing. That's funny that you mentioned that. I actually know somebody who's doing that currently. They have a house, and they rent to people that come for short visits to do work at a local hospital, because their house is located near the hospital, and it's actually worked out well for them. They've actually it basically pays their mortgage for them. You know.
Yeah, well, this is a process where you don't get rich quickly, but you do eventually gain extreme wealth in gaining assets.
Now, your book, Happiness Power. Where did that come from? Where was that inspiration to write a book such as this?
Uh, uh, Before the COVID struck, it was a few months before that, there was a headline in our local newspaper uh, saying that the World Happiness Report for 2020 reported that Americans were the least happiest in 20 years. And I was kind of dumbfounded about that. I'm a pretty optimistic fellow myself, and I thought, oh, gee, what could that be from? So I started Googling, and to my surprise, I found hundreds of studies on happiness by universities and academic studies, psychological studies. And I said, gee, this is fodder for a book. And so that's how it started after reading some of those studies.
And your conclusion on the studies was that the world is unhappy, or at least the United States is unhappy.
Well, I didn't make that conclusion entirely. The whole purpose of the book was to say is that for those that are unhappy, this is what you can do about it. But I first started out to discover. I said, well, what does happiness give you? Because it's kind of an amorphous thing. Feeling good, you're joyful, but uh, I started looking at the studies and picking each one out individually. I found that, to my surprise, that happiness gives us extreme powers that you wouldn't think about. Uh, I came out with at least 50 of those, but there's more. And those powers meaning the fact that happier people earn more money. We didn't think about that, but that's true. They earn more money. They get more promotions. They are healthier, and there are many studies on happiness and health. You have a greater immune system, lower blood pressure, and so on. And there are other studies about what family and friends do for you, because your own happiness builds that circle. Those that are not so happy, think about pessimistic people, seem to push people away. So that was really the first part of that book, the beginning, and thus the title, Happiness Power. And after I went through that, I said, well, gee, now I know that all of these wonderful things happen to you if you're a happy person. This should be an incentive for people who want to be happy. And therefore, I added chapters about how to go about being happy.
So you added like maybe steps or a process or some things that
Yeah,
people could
well,
do.
there's a surprise ending to the book, and it surprised me, and that is uh, you can't look for happiness directly because you're going to fail, and people don't realize that. And if you fail on looking for happiness, you're going to be unhappy. So it builds on unhappiness. So happiness is found indirectly in life. And if you think about it, it doesn't take a study to convince you. But if you think about it, there are many indirect things you can do. And I have a chapter in each one. For example, giving. You would think that, gee, how could I be happy if I'm giving? But what happens is there's a certain amount of endorphins that you trigger as you start to give somebody. Offer a stick of gum, for example, that little back, or offer a compliment, a surprise compliment, you know, or volunteer for the ambulance corps, or volunteer for community activities or at the hospital.
Mhm.
That does so many things for you. As you volunteer, you meet more people like you who are volunteering. That builds up your feeling of self-worth and self-confidence, and that continues to build happiness inside you. Uh, some of the things that I found which were surprising. Now I got to tell you something, because you say I might be a little different for your audience, but I'm not, because I'm a quirky old guy.
Mhm.
8 years ago, for example, I threw away my cell phone. And even though I run two small businesses here, people say, well, how do you don't have a cell phone? I said, well, when I was born in 1941, uh, the only phones there were on the wall. And
That's right.
if you wanted to get a phone call, you didn't answer the phone at night by coming downstairs to get the phone in the kitchen. So I lived with a landline phone all of those years. And I thought, well, let me go back. I walked into my doctor's office 8 years ago and saw six people waiting for the doctor, every one of them with their nose buried in the phone. And that said, my God, are we being controlled by our own phones? I could rob something here. They wouldn't recognize me because they're looking at their telephone. And yes, the first year or so, I was really unhappy about giving away my phone. But after that, uh, I felt good. And there was a study last year about cell phones, and it gave me a little pat on the back as to why I gave my phone away. And that is 64% of people now sleep with their phones. Uh, 68% of people say they couldn't give up their cell phone. Uh, the cell phone has become, especially for the younger generation, and so it's a controlling device rather than a communicating
Yeah,
device,
I've often
and that's
it's
part of the unhappiness.
yeah, actually given that some thought. I love technology, don't get me wrong. But probably the first 20 years of my life I didn't have a cell phone, and I often have thought like it anymore it's almost attached to you. It's never like out of range of, me being able to touch it or see it. But the problem I think is right, you get all these notifications and emails and these, your social media accounts, you're getting dings, text messages, people were able to get a hold of you constantly, and you're just never able to like, I don't know, quiet down or get away. I feel like you could be happier and less stressed out if you didn't weren't in contact with it 100% of the time. What are your thoughts?
Slot machines. I'm going to give you an example. Slot machines used to be mechanical, and you pull the lever down, and each of the three wheels you had the same chance because of the number of gears on it. But now they're electronic, and what they do now is they actually force you to stay at the slot machine by a number of ways, by allowing you to uh, put $1 in, but win 50 cents. And it gives you the same uh, sound as if you're winning $100. Uh, that actually uh, hits you with endorphins as soon as you push
Yes.
the machine to do. And your phone does the same thing. It hits you with endorphins if you're getting a text message.
Yes.
Uh, it's not physical; it's mental that
Right.
causes you that habit pattern. Uh, the same thing happens on social media.
Exactly. The
Every like
algorithms push.
every like that you get on social media gives you a little bit of an endorphin. And that's another study that was just completed about 2 years ago. Uh, so we are being controlled by those, and it takes a strong person to see that. So happiness is all intertwined with that. Do you want to be a person that is controlled, or do you want to be a person that's free? The freer you are, the happier you are, by the way. So uh, that's part of what's happening today in our environment. causing some of this unhappiness. And even that goes beyond that. As with the drug problem, because people are find themselves so unhappy that they're taking mood altering drugs to do that,
Mhm.
and that's habit forming.
Right.
And so there's lots of things to consider, and there's simple ways to maintain your happiness. I mentioned giving being one of them,
Mhm.
but by adding to your circle of friends is another way of maintaining your happiness. And another way is by showing gratitude. We've the society and our generation has lost our ability to show common etiquette to others. We no longer open the door because the wokeness says that we're being uh, favorable to the opposite sex, which we've always been for millennium, and now now we have to think twice about what we're doing, you
Mhm.
know. And how many times have you been thanked recently for just simple things that you do? We rarely get thanked,
Right.
incidentally. Uh, when's the last time that you got a thank you letter? Not an email, but a thank you letter. I'll bet you not, right?
Yeah.
Uh, that's something I try to do, and I try to practice, is to write thank you letters. Not every day, and not every week, but that works. So gratitude is an important part of being happy, and you need to show gratitude to others. And most people don't, and you need to practice that. So in the book, I show that if you thank people to yourself, your family, your friends, just a few times a day, but do it to yourself. All of a sudden, you start to feel, yes, that person was well. I remember my mother doing that for me, or my father, or my friend who picked me up and gave me a ride in the car. Did I really thank him for that, or did I just expect him to do that? And gratitude does bring happiness. Um, the Buddhists know that. They teach that. Uh, so, and speaking of Buddhist, meditation helps you with happiness. It reduces your stress. So just by doing 5 minutes of meditation a day, uh, develop your own mantra. Just to speak to yourself and talk to yourself, calm yourself down. That adds to your happiness. So,
That's well said. And all this you've learned through research and just life lessons, or
yeah, and more, because what I also, it forced me to go into books on happiness, and especially the old books, such as the Sufi religion, which is several thousand years old. And there's a wonderful story in a Sufi story, which really tells you what happiness is. There was a traveler walking down a dirt road, and he came across a beggar, an old man, ragged and feeble, walking the other way. And that old man was carrying a bag, dirty, ripped, stained, and he held up that bag and he said to the traveler, in this hand, I have a bag, and in this bag are all my worldly possessions. In this putrid, ugly bag is everything I own. And the traveler looked at how unhappy the old man was, and he grabbed the bag out of the old man's hand and ran down the road with it and disappeared over the ridge. And the old man dropped to his knees, mourning for the bag and crying out for the loss of the bag. And finally, after a few minutes of mourning, he got up and limped down the road again. And in the meantime, the traveler had taken the bag down the road, around a curve, and dropped it in the middle of the road. So when the old man came around, the old beggar came around the road, he saw the bag and he cried out in joy, my bag, my bag, I have found you. Thankful to God that I found you. And he yelled out in joy for his bag. And the traveler, hidden behind a bush, said, you see, That's how to make an old man happy. Now, that parable says that it's not the things that make us happy, it's how we feel about the things that make us happy.
Mhm.
And so that old man had that putrid bag, very unhappy about all his worldly possessions in it,
Mhm.
yet he was so happy when he found it again.
Hmm.
And that's the story of happiness really throughout the ages, is how we feel about things.
Yeah. Yeah, I can buy into that. I think too many times, especially in the type of culture and advertising that we're presented with now, I think a lot of people try to look for happiness externally more so than internally and try to find, ways to become happy from within rather than, the newest car or the bigger
Yeah,
house.
you get a brand new car and you're happy for how long? You're happy for the day, and
Right.
then what's next? And then that's how our mind works. We are momentarily happy when we get our raise, right? Uh, but it isn't until next week when we learn about the other worker who got a higher raise that you say, "Really, I'm not very happy about that. I want more of a raise." So we only are happy momentarily with things. So
Now, do you think it's important to just, I mean, obviously you can't stay happy 100% of the time, but do you think it's important to just be mindful of happiness in a day to
yes,
day, as you're going throughout your day?
of course, happiness is an emotion. It's a very important emotion because happiness is our incentive uh, to be and to do. Uh, every living being from the single cell amoeba, we wouldn't call it happiness, but they're looking to go from discomfort to comfort. And happiness is looking to go from discomfort to comfort, to better feelings, to good feelings. So all biological creatures are have that innately in them. So it's one of our more important emotions. And no, we are not happy all the time, and we know that. I don't have to tell you that because we know that internally. Uh, and can we be happy all the time? And the answer is no, because uh, if we are unhappy, it lets us know what happiness is. If we were happy all the time, we wouldn't know we were happy eventually. So, so what we need to do, and what we like to do, is to recognize what happiness is, what it does for us, using that knowledge as an incentive to try to do the things that we know that makes us happy. For example, uh, I just wrote a email to my brother yesterday, uh, lamenting the fact that I sent off our fourth international student. I've been hosting international students for the last 10 years. Uh, and they have lived with us, and we have given our time, and we've fed them, driven them to school, to high school, watched them graduate, and found how much smarter they were than we were. Learned a lot from them. And yesterday, one went flew home to China. Okay, he was a Chinese student, and in a way, that was part of what we did. That was giving. And my brother was saying to myself, "Did all that work for them?" I said, "It really wasn't work." I said, "I got much more out of uh, taking care of them than they did," and that was part of the giving. And I didn't do it for happiness, but it turned out that that's what gave me happiness. I did it because I felt inside, gee, that's really feels good to do that, and that's part of what giving does. Whether you're a volunteer at the hospital helping patients recover, or, as I said, the simple stick of gum. If you're in an elevator and you're taking the gum out and you offer it to a stranger, wow, just think how happy you've made the stranger
Mhm.
and surprised, and how happy you've made yourself. And so that's how you maintain your happiness or bring your happiness levels up.
Right.
They'll go down, but
And
you can bring them up.
that's probably likely too. I mean, how you perceive it or your perception of the situation probably has a lot to do with it too, right? Because I mean,
Happiness is
you're
perception.
you're helping this student out, but I mean, you're not looking at it as a burden. You're looking at it as a learning experience for you. You know, something you're doing kind for that person. Uh, Interesting.
Yes, but it doesn't have to be that. That just happens to be. I
Right.
stumbled on that, yeah, that years ago, and it took off. So, but there can be so many other things that you can do. Another part of being happiness, another chapter, is something you can do for yourself, and that's self-kindness. Uh, we can't worry about people criticizing us. I know we do, of course we do, uh, but the more you build up your self-worth, the stronger you get about how you feel about yourself, the more confident you are in yourself, uh, less you're going to feel criticism about yourself. So, and that really is harmful to our happiness if you think that you're being bullied by people who are criticizing, especially online. So uh, you can develop that good feeling. That one of the issues that I always had is that when the young people are using Facebook or uh, Instagram or something, they could easily lose their self-worth or their self-confidence. They're looking at comparing themselves to others. And you can't compare yourself to others because you are you
That's
and
right.
you are unique and there's no one other than you. So you can't be like the other person. Just be like yourself
That's right.
and work on yourself.
Compare yourself to yourself,
Yeah,
not
compare
to
yourself
others.
to yourself. And as you do that, you're removing another step to possible unhappiness.
Mhm.
So look at
And
yourself, take care of yourself, be kind to yourself.
I mean, when you really think about it, there's actually a lot to happiness. Even as far as like maybe obviously loving yourself, but having the willingness to forgive yourself, you know, if you make a mistake or maybe you wrong somebody in a way, you know, that maybe troubles you, right?
Yeah, exactly. You got to watch out for that guilt too. I'd say overall, now one other and an important part of happiness, it develops over time, and that is the power of purpose. Once you know your purpose in life, you find your happiness. And that purpose doesn't come when you're 16 or 17 or 18. You're always developing that. You're looking for that.
So
You're
true.
trying to find that. And that's why as teenagers, you feel lost because what are you looking for? You're not sure what you're looking for, but actually inside you're looking for your purpose. Well, what are you supposed to do with your life? And when you find that, my good, it hits you like a ton of bricks. And there's where your self-worth comes. And there's where your feeling about yourself comes.
That's well said. Your book, Shyness Power, I found that one probably out of the three power books, the most interesting one as far as the title, because how do you get power from shyness?
Uh, Let me ask you by telling you something that is going to surprise you. First of all, I wrote the book because I'm a shy person. I was always looking and said, why am I so shy? And why is shyness thought to be such a negative trait in people? And I looked at that because it was it was a fascinating thing. It was personal to me, and I discovered a number of things, much like looking at happiness. Uh, who is one of the most successful people in the world today? Talk about the U.S. One of the more successful, wouldn't that be Elon Musk?
Yeah, definitely Elon Musk. He's definitely
Yeah,
successful.
he's a brilliant engineer. He's probably one of the richest men in the world. He just gave a speech not too long ago to a graduating class about how shy he is and how bad he felt about being shy. And if you listen to him in his public speaking, you hear him kind of trip over his words because he is shy about speaking in public. But that has not uh, done anything to harm his success in life. And there have been so many leaders in this world and in all. But Abraham Lincoln was probably the shyest president we've ever had. You wouldn't think that because he's being written about as a great healer. But if you read his book and his writings, you will see he admits to being a very shy and introverted person. So that's really why I wrote that. I wrote it because it affected me personally. I wanted to see why people think it's so negative. And by the way, that goes all the way back to Aristotle. Aristotle was discussing how it was a weakness to be shy. And
That's a valid point. It is viewed as negative. Why is that?
because those people who are open and gregarious and hail fellow well met, they tend to attract people. They tend to want the friends around. The shy people are the ones sitting in the corner and not getting the girls to dance with them, right? Uh, so that's what it is. It's you look at that person who is the uh, bubbly, outgoing person, and you say, "That's the person I want to be. I want to be like that person." And throughout history, that was really how it was looked at. Being shy was weak. In the corner was not friendly, unfriendly.
And then through your book, you're empowering shy people to.
Well, there's no such thing as getting over shyness. You can reduce it and
It's just
improve
part
your.
of your personality, right?
Yeah, it's your personality the way it is. It's in many instances, as many studies looked at shyness and what caused shyness, and shyness is caused by two factors. And factor one, it's genetic to some extent. Some people are born shy. About 15% of us are born shy. And it's also how that young person was raised with parents. Another 15% are really trained to be shy. If you have helicopter parents who are watching over you at every moment, not to bother you, that really affects your outgoing personality. So it's either one or the other or both that is the cause of shyness.
That's interesting. Optimism. The power of optimism.
Well,
I like optimism. I think it's a wonderful tool we can use, a wonderful way to look at things. Can you talk a little bit about that book?
yeah. Here again, optimism. Those that are optimistic are the people who really uh, get the things. What I mean is they solve the problems. A pessimistic says, "Oh, well, doesn't solve any problems because he can't solve the problem. That can't be fixed," right? The optimist says, "Hey, that's tough, but I can fix that one," right? It's the mental attitude that you have. And there's good news. The studies have shown that you can take a pessimist and turn them into an optimist over time, but you can, unlike training the shy person to be gregarious, you can take a pessimistic person and change their outlook so they become more optimistic. Maybe not totally, but uh, you can make them look at the world a different way. It's the glass half empty, the glass half full. It's the same glass, but it's how you look at what's in it. So the optimistic person is the person that solves the problems in the world, and the pessimistic person is the person that really does not want to get started at all. It's the person who wants
Mhm.
to stay in bed. Of course, I'm exaggerating. The
Right,
optimistic person is up at 5 o'clock and out the door,
right. Looking forward to the adventure ahead, I guess.
looking forward to the day. Right?
Uh-huh,
Yeah.
uh-huh. And through your book, you're able to, you're just, I'm trying to get a read
Well,
on
what we
it.
do is we walk. Yeah, we talk about optimistic outlooks, what it does for you, how it does it, as with happiness. See, happiness and optimism go hand in hand. If you ask me a
Right.
question about who are the most unhappy people, uh, they tend to be the pessimistic people. They tend to be the least happiest. Can't get out of the way. Now, again, I'm over exaggerating just for this discussion. But if you are a pessimistic person and you feel that you can't solve the problem, or you lost your job and you say, well, what can I do about it? Uh, what's the use? The employment market is not good. No sense me going out there. Whereas the optimists are going to say, oh, okay, that job wasn't any good anyway. I'm going to go out and get a better one. And usually with that attitude, you do. It comes across in your interviewing, right? Just think about if you've talked to a pessimistic person, you can tell almost right away. And is that the person you want as a friend,
No,
or you want the optimistic person as a friend?
no, and you're not going to hire somebody like that either, usually.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's what we talk about.
Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
it goes back to the book on happiness, uh, where by developing your optimism, and I tell the reader how to work on that. By
Mhm.
developing your optimism, you are developing your happiness. And it's a close loop, because as you're developing your happiness, you're developing your optimism.
And your
And
optimism, through your optimism, you're accomplishing things that are probably making you feel good about yourself inside
yeah,
too,
it
right?
builds your self-worth
Right.
and your self-confidence up. And a happy person is a person that is confident in himself.
You offer strategies to master some of these behaviors, is what you're saying.
Yeah, what I try to do is break the book down, because many of these uh, investigations, academic investigations, were kind of overly complicated. So what I try to do is to break them down into their unique parts, so they were easy to understand as to what people were doing. Um, and so each chapter is broken down into how to resolve the particular issue. For example, in the chapter on the studies on giving, uh, and a chapter on receiving. So uh, you've heard the old saw that money doesn't buy happiness. Well, there was
Yes.
5 or 6 studies that argued with that and found that money does buy happiness up to $75,000. After which, you're not so additional money doesn't add to your happiness level. Now, with
Why is
inflation, that
that?
might be good. That might be
Yeah,
going up.
yeah, I think it is going up.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, because when you have your housing and your food and
You have all your
your
basics
yeah,
covered.
your basic wants taken care of, you're not struggling any longer for that. So you've made that $75,000 mark. Now, don't get me wrong. Of course, if you're making 100,000, you're probably a little bit happier than the guy making 75,000, but not much.
Right. Because all your basic needs are covered and everything's good financially, that is.
Yeah. So remember that the concept of happiness, it's not what you have; it's how you feel about what you have. It's the perception. It's not the four Lamborghinis in the garage. It's the new Volkswagen that you just bought, and you're pretty proud of that one.
I like it. I like it. Um, can we, not to really go political, but I'm kind of interested in your conservative versus liberal, and if we're born that way.
Well, there are numbers. That's the other thing that I came to, as I was looking at the happiness and the shyness, and I said, a lot of this is genetic. And if you and I were in a discussion on a political topic, there's very little I could say to you if you had the opposite opinion that would change your opinion.
This is true.
No matter if I had the facts and I was right, or whether I was wrong and you were right, you're not going to change your opinion about how you feel about something. We as humans take what's happening around us, that we are predisposed to like, and we try, our brain turns them into certain facts, even though they may not be facts, but our brain does that. And when they become facts, even if we're reading something to the contrary, we still don't believe that. Think about fake news and such. But
Do you think
DNA,
do
our
you think
DNA
that's
says
always
we
the
are
case?
tend to be born either conservative or liberal. We tend that way. Now the environment plays a major role as well.
I think
Uh,
so. I mean,
yeah,
I mean, I'm not really involved in politics a whole lot anymore. I've kind of just pushed all that away. But I think at one point in time, maybe when I was younger, I was more liberal, and I'm probably more conservative now.
yeah, that's what happens. That our environment shows us, because as we are more experienced in the world, we see more things. We see the outcomes of more things. Young, again, there's an old Sufi story about uh, what what walks on four legs in the morning, two legs in the afternoon, and three legs in the evening. And that was a man. Four legs is crawling, two legs is walking, and three legs is the old guy with the cane. And we're growing physically, but we're also growing mentally. And we tend to be liberals, I'm not saying all of us are, but tend to be liberals when we're in our youth. We are looking for the black and white when we're in the youth. As we get older, grays start to come into our thinking, right? And then
Well,
as we get,
I think the world is more gray. I think through experience, people start to figure that out.
yeah, but as a 18, 19, 20, 21 year old,
Right.
it's only black and white. But also there is a DNA component of that as well. Uh,
That's
and
interesting. I've never heard that. That's interesting.
yeah, well, that's really another. I'm a curious person, and that's really, I like to see, why are we doing that? What's causing that? What's creating that? What's happening in today when we hear, uh, for example, Black Lives Matter, right? As I'm bringing up a very sensitive, touchy thing, but let me do that because there's facts out there now. There's one fellow who was a director of Black Lives Matter who quit, saying that this was not what it set out to be. And if it was what it was set out to be, it will be a good, great benefit for the community. But it wasn't. It wasn't. It was sent out to as a money raising proposition. Now, that's part of the environment. What are the facts as we know it? And we can't use facts any longer, because each conservative or progressive sees the same glass of water as either half empty or half full, and it's the same glass of water. So you can't say to a liberal person who, if you are conservative, you can't say to the liberal that he's wrong. You can't say that, because what in his mind, he is not wrong. He is more correct, and you are wrong. He's looking at a set of facts and interpreting with the all of the synapses in his mind a different way to look at things. So it's constant. And listen, this is not so new. It's been happening since the caveman, since the cave over on that ridge was competitive to the cave over on that valley, uh, and it will continue that way uh, to have these differences. So it helps us to understand that. That's all.
Mhm.
It helps us not to use epithets at each other, because he's not a so and so. He believes that. And therefore, we have to come up with ways with which we can discuss the fact that we have different beliefs. Here's a way to look at it. The way to look at it is you really wouldn't argue as a Catholic with a Muslim and tell them that they're wrong. I mean, you could say that, but you're not going to change a Muslim's belief at all, right?
Right.
That's almost the same thing about a progressive and a conservative, a progressive and a conservative. You're not going to really change their beliefs. So what can we do about it? We have to learn to get along. Uh, you know,
But
not to take out our swords.
that's it's almost, I don't know. I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like maybe in prior years, you could have an intelligent discussion with somebody who's seen the opposite ways. I don't know. I just feel like it's more, I don't know. If we feel more separated than
It's more
ever
intense
now.
now.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
is more
it's
intense.
more
That's a good
intense.
word for it.
And that gave me the ability to explain to my Chinese student, who was 20 years old, just turned 20, who was just confused as to what was going on, as to how the world works. And I said, look, uh, I'm going to be this year, I hate to say it, and I'll whisper it, I'm going to be 80 years old. I can't believe that, how old I am. But what it does, it gives me the gift of seeing history. And what happens when you have one extreme to the other, it's a swing of a pendulum. What happens, the pendulum will have swung so hard to the left or right, it will start to come back again. So I'm confident that it will come back. It may come back when we have to hurt a little bit more. But look what's happening now and today. You're starting to see some pushback, which wasn't happening before. Conservatives are now starting to sue progressives. It's the first time that happened, and they won. So there's a pushback against that. And what happened, there'll be now more of a pushback as a result of that. And that pendulum will slowly come back. The woke will start to feel like napping, you know? So it will happen. It will happen, believe me. But, it won't happen without some wounds and, some bandages.
Right. Right.
So you can be confident about that.
Well, that's good.
That's the human being.
And what made you to decide to look into that and write a book on this? Or have you always
But
been like
because of my
involved in?
Chinese students who were, they come back and uh, they love China.
Mhm.
Uh, who can blame them? I mean, that's where they were brought up.
Right.
They are not too alienated with the government, really. And we, looking at it from afar, see the Chinese government as dictatorial and harming freedom. These students know will defend it. And
That's interesting. Can we talk a little bit about that?
sure.
I mean, perhaps though, from our perspective, don't you think, you know, from like the national media, we're probably getting spun a story that's, maybe not completely, full of facts. It's kind of skewing our beliefs on China, or, what do they say about China? I mean, they live there.
Well, first of all, I developed a wonderful friendship with an attorney in China who was the father of the first student I had, and we write every week, uh, and so he keeps me informed of what's happening in China. And being a successful attorney in China, he's a higher level person. So I get the more political perspective. So he's able to give it to me. He sees China a little bit more like we might see it, but still, again, he's a loyal citizen of China. And I have to be careful of what I say and what my comments are for fear of offending him. So the as far as what the news is describing about China, that's coming fairly well because there's no reason to filter it like there is for filtering domestic news, right? So that as uh, the Chinese goes, they are it's a strange organization in one way. In one way, they're promoting capitalism. I mean, look what they've done. They've sucked out most of our industry, and I'm familiar with that because one of my businesses, I do a great deal of importing of Chinese goods for reselling. Art supplies is what we do. So I get what they're doing on the business side. On the political side, there's a camera on every street corner now. Every neighborhood has a reporting person to make sure that that family didn't have two children, that they only had one children. Now they've changed it to three children's policy. And I just said to the student before he left, I said, "Did you hear that the Chinese government is now allowing three students?" I said, "That's going to really exhaust the men in China. Now they have to produce three kids." I said, "They're going to come out exhausted from just doing the one." And so the student thought that was not very funny because I said, "Well, you're going to have to work hard now when you get back." So, so yes, there's great differences but one of the differences is the culture,
Mhm.
the uh, uh, the schools. Uh, the young son of this friend, he doesn't get out of school until July 17th. Uh, and he'll be back in school the second week in August. Uh, what are we doing here? You know, we're debating whether we're going back to a Zoom class or going back to school in the fall. And
Right.
usually in the fall it's in September. So the Chinese are already outperforming us that way.
Well, our
And
education system's definitely lacking,
it really is.
which is unfortunate because, some of, I mean, we've got a lot of talent over here too, but I feel like, a lot of the, maybe the great scientists and great thinkers and experts coming up are going to be all foreign and
Yeah, it's also Dylan, it's also the perspective. You remember I said happiness is perspective too.
Mhm.
The Chinese over 3,000 years has developed a culture of team players.
Right.
You don't do anything. You're all dressed and going to school in the same outfit, for example, and you're out on the plaza doing the same exercise and the same dances. You don't do things individually. You do things in a teamwork. In this country and Europe, but mostly in this country, we're individuals.
Right.
Therefore, we're allowed to make an invention, to do things, and that's why we've shown such great advancement in technology, because we don't need to have someone agree with us to do it. We just do it,
Right.
right? Whereas in China, you have to have the committee agree with you before you do that. So that's another bit. So we can talk about maybe their educational system is stronger than ours, and the Chinese have always been strong in education. 1,000 years that the people in the political power were taken out of the higher education units to serve in political positions. Uh, and they continue to do that. So the differences in the Chinese and the Americans are great. Can we ever get along? Well, look, we do have some problems. We have educational problems, and we have infrastructure. If you go to China now, I've been there several times. You get off the plane and you see these dazzling high rises and these brand new airports and the high-speed trains and so on. And then you go to Kennedy Airport, where I dropped the student off, and you look and say, "Oh my God, it's embarrassing," you know, right? He had to go to Penn Station to pick up to get a blood test before he went back to China. And he came back to me and he said, "What's that smell in Penn Station?" And I said, "Well, a lot of these homeless people use that as a bathroom." So in China, they can do that.
Right. Wow. That's interesting stuff. How
But
was
we got
the,
off the topic, didn't we?
yeah, that's all right though. It's
That's all
good.
right.
Wherever
Yeah.
it goes, I guess, the
Yeah, I don't
conversation.
mind.
Hey, listen, it's been a good discussion. I appreciate you taking, time out of your busy schedule. I know you got a lot going on to be with us today. Where can the listeners, find the work that you're doing, pick up some of your books? I definitely am going to check out Happiness Power. It sounds fascinating, and I do recommend that, my listeners do the same.
Well, Happiness Power is available in a paperback, ebook, audiobook, and also has been translated into Spanish now. And it's all available on Amazon.com or through Barnes and Noble, or my website, which is robertgilljr.com. Amazon might be easier, though.
Excellent stuff. And thanks again for coming on the show.
Well, my pleasure. Again, thanks for having me. You take care.
You too.